Warning, viewer discretion advised. Some of this chapter has some graphic descriptions of sex and violence. Just like in real life here on Earth, there's good and evil, love, lust, sex, crime, and justice, as well as damnation and salvation depicted in this book. This chapter, and some of the others, depicts some of the evil. So, you've been warned. So I'm going to go ahead with this. Chapter 4. Viewer discretion advised. Moonlight on Open Graves. Chapter 4. After a hot day at the diner, stripping off the greasy clothes and relaxing under the shower felt incredibly refreshing. Afterwards, Darlene patted on some body lotion and lay herself out spread-eagled on her queen-size bed. The heat and humidity outside were stifling, and her son and a few other local kids were finding relief in the local swimming hole just down the hill from her house. She could hear their excited shouts as a breeze blew in, fluttering her bedroom curtains, softly caressing her body. Though the kids sounded hysterical about something, Darlene's mind held on to one image, one concept, and that was Vernon P. Hicks. Besides, kids always sound hysterical about something. Porkchop was only 5 the day his father set out on the highway in his Mack truck to haul a load of fertilizer to Galveston, Texas, and never came back. Not that John Bacon was ever around much to help raise Byron, and when he was around, he wasn't there to be a father. With no older brother or father about, and Ma working the diner long hours, Porkchop had little guidance other than his own guiding appetites and observations. Porkchop ruled the roost, both at home and in his circle of influence, and his philosophy went along these 2 lines. 1, I get everything I want, and you get nothing. 2, you don't like it? I'll bash your ugly face in. Byron became widely known as Porkchop around age 8 when his level of obesity skyrocketed. His size was in no small way greatly exasperated by his insatiable hunger for anything with sugar. Chocolate, soda pop, ice cream were the greatest things in the world to Porkchop, and he couldn't get enough, and it didn't bother him one bit what people thought of him either. If Darlene brought home a quart of ice cream and hid it in the back of the icebox behind the frozen meats and vegetables, Porkchop would surely find it and run off with it, taking the whole quart down in one sweet and secret sitting. At school, he beat up kids to steal both their sweets and their money, for money was a means to more sweets. But all in all, his appetite was not the root of his socially unacceptable behavior. The root of his behavior lay planted deep within the boy, beyond the flab. Only through the gateway of his eyes could it be seen, something darkly ancient. At age 11, Porkchop placed a lactating cat and her litter in a box, sealed it, doused it in gas, and lit it on fire. At age 12, he shot the tooth out of a singing old man on a tractor with a BB gun. And now, at 14, came the turbulent appetites of puberty to fuel his misdeeds. So when little Bobby Martin showed up at the swimming hole with a bag of Tootsie Rolls and his 12-year-old sister Becky, Porkchop got out of the water and took a strong notice. Truth was, he was bored of winning the belly whapper diving contest with his friend Todd. His ma was up in the house lying down, so anything went down here at the swimming hole where he was uncontested king. Hi, Porkchop. Hey, Bobby, what's in the bag? Tootsie Rolls my ma got me. Want one? Bobby stood there smiling in his striped swimming trunks. He had a beach towel with the Lone Ranger on it draped over his shoulder. Becky had a one-piece bathing suit and also held a towel rolled up. The Martins were fortunate enough to come from a traditional middle-income, two-parent milk and cookies arrangement. Porkchop wore only cut-off jeans, and his fat rolled over them all the way around in one great roll. He had a leech on his left butt cheek as he huffed up the grassy bank to accept Bobby's offer. "Yeah, give me one," and he grabbed the bag away from the smaller boy. "Hey, I'd said just one." "Oh yeah," Porkchop said. "Here." Poof. Porkchop's tight little fist hooked out and slugged Bobby hard in the gut, knocking the wind out of him. Porkchop liked the effect the punch had on Bobby, who was doubled over, so he took the opportunity to get him in a headlock and sock him in the left eye 3 times, hard. Bobby howled in fright and pain, but to no avail. His helpless fright just gave Porkchop an even bigger thrill. Bobby's sister Becky jumped and shouted, "Let go of him! Let go!" In the house, Darlene heard the racket as she lay nude in bed with her phantasm Vern thing going on in her head. And because the mind can only entertain one or the other, Vern or the kids, she dismissed the kids, or else Vern would vanish. Down the hill, Porkchop continued wailing on Bobby, socking him in the side of the head, the face, his scrawny back. All the while, his buddy Todd watched excitedly from the water. "Get him, Porkchop! Get him good!" Then Becky intervened with a branch, striking Byron in the chubby chops with a swish and a smack. Porkchop let go of Bobby, who ran off screaming and crying. His face was red, his eyes swollen and cut, his nose bleeding. He had fist-sized red welts all about his ribs and back. Now Becky stood alone, facing the grinning menace Porkchop. She began to pace about nervously. Just as Becky tried to run, Porkchop tackled her and easily pinned her under his cold, wet, flabby mass. He sat on her chest, pinning her thin arms to the grass with his knees. She was totally helpless. The leech on Porkchop's butt cheek was crushed dead. "What you gonna do, huh, Becky? Smecky?" He felt an intense thrill at seeing her there under him, so tender and defenseless. He felt the warmth of her body through his soaked cut-offs. His hand went to her budding breast. Becky screamed. Back at the house, things were also heating up for Darlene. Vern cupped her breast with his strong electromagnetic hands as his nude, hard body brushed against her own. His mysterious face was only inches away, and she dove into his tranquil green eyes and swam about, nude in the pools of his gentle soul, while that little smile of his, that sinfully irresistible little smile, played with her psyche, caressing it, tickling it, downright mocking it. No one man should own such deadly charm. Oh God, how she loved, lusted, and desired that man. His breath and hers melded into one warm, moist kiss. Images and feelings soon replaced cognitive thought. Life's a dream, Vern. Life is a bowl of whipped cream and red cherries in a green field of yellow daisies and orange butterflies. Joy, ecstasy, happiness, love, peace, warm, soft, strong, love. And then a fly landed on her right breast, tickling it in a bad way. She slapped her breast, causing her nipple to perk and flush. But the fly flew first. Becky back to business with Vern. Where were they? Oh yes, his eyes, swimming nude within his soul. A kiss, a hot one, that welded 2 sets of lips within a hot bead of living love. Darlene slowly closed her eyelids some as her eyes rolled up into her head, showing just 2 white lines under her flittering eyelashes. Her moist lips parted as warm breath sighed past her tongue into Vern's ear as she awaited the entry. The fly returned and landed upon her lower lip. Her hand went up instinctively and slapped down hard, but once again the fly was quicker and escaped. Vern vaporized instantly. "Oh, you little shit! Couldn't you leave a poor girl to her lonesome dreams? You're going down, fly." Darlene sprung out of bed, grabbed a vanity magazine, rolled it up tight, and held it like an angry Indian with a tomahawk. She surveyed the room. Where was that fly that vaporized her nude time with Vern? Suddenly the fly came into sight as it casually buzzed by. "Yeah!" And she swung at the airborne target, but only hit and knocked over her porcelain lamp. "Oh, you!" The fly landed upon her pillow. "Yeah!" Missed again. Where did that son of a maggot go now? There at the open window, the black speck sat upon the lacy green curtain. It casually preened its cellophane-like wings with two of its 6 legs, as if to say, "Come on, bitch, give it your best shot." She threw the magazine and struck the fly square. The catastrophic impact fractured the fly's thorax, severing its left wings, while one of the 6 legs was ripped clean off and stayed on the curtain. Both injured fly and magazine flew out the window and onto the grassy lawn. Almost instantly, a red ant discovered the flightless fly as it crawled about a small circle upon the brown earth beneath the tall spears of Kentucky grass. The ant sent a chemical message out to the nearest of its fellow ants, which arrived and assisted in the fly's disassembly. Darlene stood and stared at her nude self in the huge dresser mirror. The kids were still shouting down the hill, but she ignored it. She noted her beautiful body, the curves and tone of which were nearly feminine perfection. Such a waste that she couldn't give herself to Vern. A damn waste. Wicked, strange world, one that would form a woman so, and fill her with love and hot desire, ability and intent, and waste it, utterly waste it. Unappreciated and unloved even. Damn. She needed a real man to harness the kinetic love potential she saw in the mirror. She had a part-time lover, but he didn't have the goods to really light her fire, and he surely didn't love her. And luscious Vern, what a waste too. Alone on that farm, in bed alone every night, no loving, no children of his own, no wife, nothing but solitude and thoughts for company. So she thought, and she stood tall and blonde, toned and tanned, and she saw herself caressing her breast, plentiful. Give her just 1 hour with that man, just one common hour, alone in a locked room, with a bed and perhaps a few pillows, and she'd rock and grind that man, twist, shake, domesticate, and enslave that man. Just 1 hour alone, and she'd conquer Vernon P. Hicks, the junior, not for a time, but for the ages. Sigh, dreams of love were about all she had. In the lawn, 2 ants were just removing the fly's insolent head. What do ants dream of? When the sex fantasy was mentally played out, she dressed, went out of the room, and started a pot of macaroni and cheese. She then decided to check on her son down the hill. Outside, she paused at the top of the hill and saw a pork chop on top of what looked like a little girl. "Byron, what are you doing down there?" Byron Porkchop now had Becky pinned beneath his weight, laid out full on top of her. Though her clothes were yet on, he was progressing from molestation to outright rape. He was kissing her, and his hands were forcefully groping her in all sorts of places. Porkchop's eyes took on those of a demon-possessed pig. There was a flat, ill look to them. Becky screamed again. Todd stood behind a tree and shyly watched, wide-eyed and confused. He finally sensed what was happening was very wrong and timidly spoke out. "Get off her, Porkchop." Shut your pie hole, Todd. Go away. Now. And Porkchop began groping under his flab, trying to find a snap to his pants. But before he could unsnap his jeans, Darlene tuned into what was going on. Byron, get off of her! And she ran down the hill. Porkchop got off of Becky, who instantly ran away. Porkchop stood up, his face flushed. He didn't feel guilty or ashamed, but upset that his ma had stopped him from having what he wanted. Who was that little girl? She asked. Just my friend, Porkchop said. Get up to the house, now! Go inside and wait there. Darlene was at loss on how to handle Porkchop. Becky and Bobby Martin's parents were not. The same day, Deputy Brad Armstrong arrived at Darlene's place and questioned the entire family. Porkchop and Darlene were soon summoned to appear in court before Judge Roberts for various charges. The short and long of the matter was lenient. Porkchop was grounded for a week and banned from the swimming hole all summer. The Martins forbid their children any contact with Porkchop. From that point on, the memory and sight of Becky haunted Porkchop more than any tub of ice cream or chocolate bar. He had new appetites and unfinished business with Becky, and it was not a question of if or what or how, but only when. For Porkchop got everything he wanted, and if you didn't like it, he'd bash in your face. That philosophy applied to Becky's virginity just as much as Bobby's bag of Tootsie Rolls. He'd wait for the right time. The Martins only lived a mile up their rural road. Becky was as good as done, and her notion of a just and safe world was about to get forever dashed